we're back for part 2 of the retrospective. I'm having a great time.
The wheel in the sky keeps on turning, Chris.
Always. It's gonna
wheel
turn.
Wheel in the sky keeps on turning.
I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. But okay.
Oh my God.
Another deliciously awkward beginning. Thank you guys. Appreciate
What is wrong with us and you especially?
I'm very deeply disturbed people. It's a good thing, you know. One of the reviews we got on our iTunes rating says, "Great for a rewatch. Doesn't focus around the hosts, but a deep dive into the episodes." And it's a good thing for all of you. We don't focus on.
Do they want more about us?
No. That it was a 5-star review saying it's about the episodes.
I'm glad it's not about us.
Yeah, because let me tell you something. That'd be a fucked up podcast if we
It'd be real weird.
So, but you know what? That's okay. We're gonna get right into it here with another top 3.
Top 3, yeah.
All right, and with that, I want to get into our top 3 favorite moments of season 2.
This is always
This is the
hardest question because
this is the hardest one.
Obviously every episode is made up of hundreds of moments, and to pick just 3 from a whole season of amazing television is fucking impossible.
It's impossible. The idea of having 4 of us talk about our favorite moments is that we're all gonna maybe give different ones.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but so that we'll get to talk about it, because on any given day at any given moment in life, this list could change just based on ooh, that one, ooh, that one, ooh, that one. We were going over favorite episodes earlier. Lily and I were talking about it, and there was an episode. I was like, oh yeah, that episode is in this season. Fuck, how am I gonna pick 3? Mm-hmm. And it's even worse with moments, because there's just this every episode. You could do a top 10 moments in every episode, let alone 3 for a whole season. But we're doing it. We're up for the challenge here. This is the Sopranos podcast, baby.
Yeah.
So who would like to go first on moments?
I'll lead.
Great.
So, again, impossible to pick, so I'm just hoping to highlight some moments that might be some other people's favorite moments as well, or among their favorites. So actually, I have a bunch from Big Girls Don't Cry, which I think is an amazing episode. So, as mentioned in part 1 of our retrospective, Furio versus the tanning salon and brothel staff in Big Girls Don't Cry is just this amazing moment.
Yeah, okay.
It is such a star turn for the character and just really lets you know what his function is going to be going forward as the guy you do not fuck with ever. Mm-hmm. Ever. Because this is just an action movie character that just comes in. He doesn't care if you're white, black, woman, man, old, young, whatever.
Yep.
He's just going to hit you in the face with his fist until you give him his fucking money.
Yeah.
And it's just brutal and cool to watch.
And that moment is especially driven into awesomeness by the way it was shot.
Yeah, it's shot from behind him.
Yeah, that tracking shot.
So it's like video game POV of just being watch and learn and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have 2 more from the same episode that I'm tying. I know it's illegal. I'm sorry. This is a tied moment. So this would be Chris's turn as Jim Stark in Rebel Without a Cause in his acting for writers class. Because it's such a good moment for Chris, almost coming out of his shell, or he does come out of his shell for a minute of just all his guards are let down. He finds this really authentic moment and is ashamed of it, right? Is sort of embarrassed by it. It's just a beautiful moment for the character, and just really makes Christopher me in that episode. But tied with the same moment as, Chris versus Mitch in the improv scene when he just hits Mitch as hard as he can in the face before running out on the class forever. It is hard not to pick this moment this season, and I really tried to not pick the moment, but I could still remember the feeling the first time I ever saw Janice shoot Richie at the kitchen table. And it's just, the moment is so explosive, and it's one of the most famous moments in the whole series. Yeah. I did want to acknowledge it, even though it almost defies acknowledgement, because you can't ignore it. It's not something anyone would ever miss. It's right there, but it's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing the way it makes everything turn. It's the way it makes sort of inevitability special. Yeah. It's just a great, great moment. And, honorable mention for the entire episode of D-Girl. And that's it.
D-Girl is a special place in our hearts, I think, as movie people and as, Yeah. And it's just so rich.
Well, the real honorable mention from Dear Girl comes to me with it's Chris's story in the pizza parlor, right? Mm-hmm. About the girl who was burned with the acid, right? Mm-hmm. That story has always stayed with me, but also it is the dread fascination on the faces of Amy and Jon Favreau as the story unfolds. Mm-hmm. And you know that for them, they have crossed the threshold into the real world. Oh no, we're not in Hollywood anymore. This is something grotesque but special, and we're fascinated.
Very fun exchange from that crying game. This is a true story. I love that.
That was my honorable mention, and you described it far better than I could have.
Oh,
so
please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jordan.
Who'd like to go next? Lily?
I can, sure. So number 3 is Meadow gets Eric's car.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge turning point for Meadow. It just, every time I see that episode, my heart sinks. Because it just, you feel that disgust that Meadow feels, like realizing it's her own friend's car. It gets too close to home. Because I feel like school is kind of almost where those two kids can kind of just be themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much for AJ, but definitely for Meadow. And that slapping her in the face really is a very memorable moment for me.
Yeah.
Number 2 is anything having to do with Pauly food in Italy. It just brings a smile to my face watching him it's not a schadenfreude, but there's just such a charm watching him hate Italy.
Yeah.
And wanting to love it so much.
Yeah, I love when he just tries to salute with his little espresso, and the guy who tries to salute is just not having it.
Just
cocksucker.
It's a pure joy and a light sadness at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For me, and so I had to say it. And then Carmela with the ricotta pie.
Ooh, yeah.
In Jeannie Cusimano's sister's office. It's so just boss bitch. I'm here. But what do you mean? I'm just bringing you a ricotta pie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Great moment.
It's like
Great moment.
Just pure female manipulation at its best, and it's just masterful and masterfully acted by goddess Edie Falco.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Very well said.
Okay, moments. 2 quick honorable mentions. First, guy walks into a psychiatrist's office. Tony comes home to Carmela. Just dullness, the regularity of things. Other honorable mention, house arrest. Tony returns to Satrial's. Great moment at the end there.
Yeah.
Yes. I love those prolonged moments of life. Just casual life.
That house arrest moment, that is the one where kind of Pussy turns the other way early and kind of like walks back into the shop, right?
Yeah, that guy Dominic's speeding through the neighborhood. They're talking about moisturizer. Tony's polishing his shoes.
There's like kind of a tableau kind of going on in the
Yeah. It's a great ending frame.
Yeah.
Number 3, D-Girl. Big Pussy and Anthony Jr. The scene where Big Pussy goes and talks to him and embraces him. And the weight of his treachery is there. It's a great episode in the overall. Also great moments at the end with Chris as well.
You're talking about the scene at the house at the confirmation when he goes up to have a heart-to-heart with him about his dad and what a good man he is.
Yeah. That scene and what the doubleness of it all is powerful. It's one of the great offerings of Vincent Pastore in this season, who does such great work.
Yeah.
Number 2, Richie sits on a copy of New Jersey Bride, and then Janice puts one in his chest and one in his face.
Yep. I mean, that moment is so just explosive.
Yeah, just unforgettable. Not much more to say about it. And number 1, more overlap with Lily. Tony lays it down for Meadow after he gives her the car. And there's a doubleness here too in the lesson that the kid is taught, because it's so brutal and it seems to certainly come out in a clumsy and angry way, but it's also so clear that Tony wants Meadow to understand this, and it's not a purely vindictive action. It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So to me, it's I think from season 2, it's the moment with most lasting impact for me.
Yeah. It's a big moment. It's not just spiteful. It is on the surface level. It's like, you're going to eat this car one way or the other. You're getting it like this, or you're getting it as things. But you're getting this car. And you're going to have to swallow it. And it's a metaphor for their whole lifestyle. But it's also deeper than that, because as is elicited through therapy, and it's such a smart way to write all this, that in a way Tony is teaching her to fly, making her, like, forcing her to have a moment of confrontation with the life that she's been born into.
Yeah.
So good. So powerful. My top 3 moments. Jordan, you and I are of like minds on these top moments.
Oh, boy.
I can't forget last season, and I'll tell you why you're not cheating on your on your tie there, because I think you and I both had the same moment from season 1, which was just general Tony looks up, which happens a lot in season 1.
Yeah.
Him searching for something higher and trying to understand the more kind of sophisticated analyses of life and art and music and higher learning, institutions of higher learning and therapy and the subconscious mind, and how he's at heart just this kind of blue-collar guy overwhelmed by this, but intrigued, smart enough to be intrigued by it. And these moments where he looks up really capture the spirit of who this guy is and what it's all about. So, with the spirit of that, considering that was multiple moments in one, my number 3 moment is basically your number 2. I just wrote Chris's acting class as a broad, moment of
his
Chris.
brush with higher learning, with with something that opens him up. Yeah.
So, and that includes the Mitch improv, that includes the improv with Omar where he drops his oranges, it includes the Rebel Without a Cause. All of it.
Yeah.
It's just Chris going through that.
We mentioned this when we actually discussed the episode, but folks really underestimate what it goes into really being an actor.
Yeah.
You know, depending on the material you're working on, you have to be very vulnerable. And if someone like Christopher, who has a lot of issues, is not ready to be vulnerable, and I think he's surprised by what he finds there. And I think those moments are just crazy good to watch.
Yep. So that'll always stick with me is that moment, and Chris doing that. Another Chris moment in season 2, and this is more of a personal favorite. I don't know that it holds up to some of the emotional gravity of a lot of the moments you guys brought up, the Meadow car scene, the Regot pie even, but it's it brings a fucking smile to my face every single time, so it counts. Chris and Jon Favreau, coked up, talking about his script. He's got to wear, we find out about Frankie, he wears taps on his shoes. It's fucking absurd. It's the more we learn about Chris's script and Jon Favreau trying to diplomatically tell him it sucks, and Chris is too coked up to not get it. He asks, have you ever, and Chris is like, I can't tell you if you don't ask. They're just having so much fucking fun. You could tell that was a fun day on set just by watching those actors work. So that's a number 2 moment for me, for just the pure joy it brings me, the pure smile it brings to my face every time. And number 1, Janice shoots Richie. We have the same number 1 moment. I'm wondering how many seasons this record's going to keep up, Jordan, where you and I have the same top moment. But not that lists without this as the top moment aren't valid, but this is... I've watched this series now several times, and I've done it with friends, with people. I've gotten other people into it and watched it with friends, watched it with Lily. If you're out there listening and you watched it for the first time, you can't tell me you weren't totally shocked by that. Everyone I've ever watched it with is audible gasp. It's you see the gun and it's oh, this, what is, wait, oh! It's you can't believe it just happened. Yep. And the fact that and we talked about this in the episode, but the fact that they managed to surprise you even after a hit has been ordered on Richie. So you're okay, violence is going to happen. Either Tony is going to have a hit or Richie is going to get hit. And they still manage to shock you in the very next scene.
Because just like in Sopranos fashion, and you've talked about this, and I will respect your no spoilers rule, right death, wrong reason.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big theme in The Sopranos. And, Richie was supposed to go down, but he was supposed to go down in the last episode and by Tony, right? Well, it's the penultimate episode in Janice? Right? Yep. So, of course it's a big shock. Of course feels like it comes out of nowhere. That's not what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And that's what Paul was saying earlier about just constantly surprises you.
Sure.
But surprising, but also makes sense.
Correct.
In a great
you see
way.
Her switch. You see how he talks. You can watch her
and there's a lot
absorbing
of
the information. There. He's talking to her, and she's thinking, this is what I'm going to put up with the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
No. Boom.
And Jordan, I think you hit the nail on the head. I agree with you. This is an interpretation. It's not explicit, but I think it's there in Aida Totoro's acting and in some of the subtext there. She's lived a complicated, crazy life, Janice has. And you mentioned in the episode that you think this is definitely not the first time Janice has been hit by a man.
Correct.
But it's definitely the last.
Yeah, I think that's the read. I watched it again, and she receives the hit. The first moment is the initial shock of being punched in the face, which any person would have. And then it's the way her mouth traces her face, where the trace is familiar. It's like, I've felt this before. And then the next thing you see is her hand gradually leaves her mouth, which is now bleeding, and the expression in her eyes is a searching for what to do next in this moment. Like, it's decision time then and there. Mm-hmm. And then she moves. Mm-hmm. And that's how quickly it goes from, he just hit me, no one is ever going to hit me again, right? And that's no words on that. Mm-hmm. She's a master.
Correct.
Actor.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said.
So, great moments, guys. Thank you for that. That was a great top 3. Made me feel things just talking about it in this way. But these are the moments that left an impact on us. Feel free to chime in on this. I want to hear from you guys. Tag us in social media posts, email us, whatever. Let us know your favorite moments from season 2. There's no lack of them. There's no shortage of great moments. Again, I could make 50 different versions of this top 3 list and talk about even shit that we didn't put in this particular list. It's so rich. But I want to shift gears a little bit. A lot of season 1 was built around Livia and Junior as the primary antagonists, and they're vital and they're dangerous, and they're playing their own game both with each other and with the people around them, and they are such forces of gravity. And they're able to maintain that gravitas, but in diminished roles in Season 2. I want to talk about the elders here in Season 2. Junior, Livia, the positions they find themselves in. Junior's having health problems. He's under house arrest. He's under financial strain from the impending trial. Livia, what has this stroke, quote-unquote, done to her? And what position has it left her in? And what power does she still have in this whole situation? And where does she all go? And how she plays into her history with Tony plays into what happens at the end of the season with the airline tickets. So let's have a conversation about Junior and Livia. I think it's a worthwhile conversation.
My grandfather used to say, you have to be brave to get old. My grandfather only made it to 70, and then he unfortunately passed away from cancer. Junior is someone who, we really get the impression of Junior that when he was younger, he was a hellraiser, no nonsense, like this guy fucking ran shit. Like was impressive in his day. But now he's an old man. He's old. He is infirm. He has health issues. And it's made all that more complicated by the fact that Junior is a terribly dignified character who is, very conscious of how he is perceived by other people. We went through this so much with Boca in season 1. And, now that he's been removed from his position of power, but quote-unquote gets to keep his stripes, he has to kind of like live this false life where he's not really in a position of power in the family. It is a marvelous turn for the character, because now we're kind of taking him out of, contention in terms of what goes on with the capital F family, more about like what goes on with capital O old age.
Yeah.
Right? And that struggle is in many ways more interesting because he is someone who should have died quite a while ago. He should have been killed in some kind of gunfight. He should have been whacked. Some weird accident should have happened to him. He should have died in his fighting days. Because now that he's not in his fighting shape anymore, he doesn't really know what to do with himself. But what a treat for us, the viewer, that we get to see him just kind of be forced to endure. And the amazing stories that come out of that. It's cool in this season that he kind of acts as like this shadow emperor, right? That Richie can kind of go see behind Tony's back, and they can have these fun plotting scenes. And even though it doesn't work out for Richie, it does lend Junior some of his old gravitas, because he does get to still weigh in on the important issue and ultimately make a truce with Tony. Paul said earlier in the first part of our retrospective that a lot of this season is kind of a reunion love story between Tony and Junior. I feel that very much. I feel that, Junior doesn't return to power by the end, but he rises above subsistence level of ownership, right? He's back in the circle of Tony's trust, and he's still relevant again by the end of the season. But we are left with the impression that, he's very much in his diminished state.
And he overcomes a lot by doing that, because, let's face it, this is a guy who cares a lot about his dignity and his face and his name and his reputation. And growing old is a series of increasingly frequent indignities. Getting sick, going to doctor, having awful fucking annoying procedures. Getting your hands stuck in the garbage disposal for 6 hours while you scream and try to pick up the phone with a ladle.
We shouldn't laugh, but it's very funny.
It is funny. No, I think it's meant to be funny. We're supposed to laugh at that, but yeah, that's what Junior's facing, and he still manages to somehow. He's a sly old fox. He's not. He does get outplayed in season 1 by Livia, but this dog still has a couple tricks up his sleeve, even if there is a dreading kind of foreboding sense around Junior that his last run against Tony may have been his last real heyday. You know what I mean? Like you said, he should have. That conflict with Tony should have killed him, but he just got arrested, and Junior made it perhaps a little too long for his own good.
Junior's punishment is that he's being forced to live in essentially a normal life. That's the punishment. He should be in jail. He should be dead. He should be on the lam from the law. But he's just forced to live life as a regular old man. He cannot do this.
Yeah.
In one of the episodes, I think, when we talked about Knight in White Satin Armor, Jordan mentioned King Lear. And, this is where Junior, again, I think, has thought of himself in terms of actually kind of Shakespearean dignity. And now he's very dependent upon younger people. There's really gutsy storytelling, I think, with both Junior and Livia, dealing with, of course, how uncomfortable it is to be older, to have these various medical issues. It's not something that TV has traditionally done a lot. Certainly not when TV is used to sell soap and other things that are advertised. They stay away from older characters.
Once in a while, you'll get a great movie about elderly people or aging, but TV for the most part.
There's a reason for that. The old people don't buy products as much. Unless they're watching news channels, which is why you get ads for fucking unguents and stuff on news shows. But here they took it and went with it, and it is really interesting. It's interesting to see both of these characters diminished, not only in terms of screen time, but in terms of how well they can do getting out of doors, how comfortable they are in life. And I think in particular with Junior, who realized by the end of season 1 that he had been second fiddle, we get to see a bit more of him, particularly I think in House Arrest and Knight in White Satin Armor, that brings it back together in an interesting way, maybe even regaining some of that dignity. But I will say that at the end of the run, he still gets kicked out of the graduation ceremony in a very funny moment. Carmela sees you here, she's gonna rip you a new asshole. I'm leaving, and he storms off. It's very, again, sort of sad in a way, but pretty funny.
Yep. And Livia, her role is diminished naturally by the narrative, so I'm not throwing any kind of any implication that it was unnaturally done, but I do also know that Nancy Marchand was starting to have some health issues at this point, and so that may have also been a part of why she didn't appear perhaps as frequently as she did in season 1. Season 1, you could count on at least 1 or 2 really strong Livia scenes per episode. She was a little bit more sporadic, and a lot of her scenes, because of her health situation, the character's health situation, she was immobile. Some scenes you could tell maybe she was a little more tired or in pain that day. A little bit of kind of a meta thing creeping in, but Livia still looms large. You can't deny that when she has her moments, she maximizes her minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Coming through on the intercom, she can make you laugh. That last scene with Tony is disturbing. Very disturbing. Well, not last scene, but that scene in Knight in White Satin Armor where she comes down the stairs and they have that face-to-face and she's being manipulative and toxic and laughing at him when he falls into a cry. She is just such a dynamic performer. You gotta hand it. She is still, to me, even in her diminished state, the specter that looms over all. It's the thing. She has become she who must not be named in this one. Tony literally is she's dead to me, don't mention her.
Right. Janice actually refers to her as that, I think, at one point, yeah.
But she's not gone, and she is still a force. This is the woman who seeded this garden, as you said earlier.
Yeah, well, we have like a little parallel storytelling because, you know, Richie seeks out Junior's old power, hoping to rally it against Tony. Janice seeks out Livia's power, you know, trying to see how she can leverage that, and that's the parallel there. They're still potent characters, Junior and Livia. There is still power there. It's just not power that they can necessarily wield. They're going to have to, you know, lend it to others in some way. But yeah, Livia can never not loom large. She is the specter over the whole show, arguably the entire series.
And of course, Tony hasn't really dealt with much of anything.
Right, again, the denial.
Right, well, of course, what she did to him in childhood and how she plotted against him, which Melfi is begging him to reflect on at the end.
Yeah.
And he can't yet.
It's just too painful. You know, how does anyone turn to face that, you know?
She's just too senile to remember who she hates. That's another great line from Knight in White Satin Armor when he finds out she's on Prozac.
Yeah, Junior is really trying to put them back together. He's very insistent that, well, maybe not insistent, but he would like for them to be able to coexist, right? I think some of that is to absolve himself of some guilt.
And also to save his own face.
Right.
Because if Tony's able to make peace with his mother, she wasn't the master manipulator.
Right, exactly. I think it probably is more that. But also, you know, whenever it's brought up and Junior has the chance to weigh in on it, you know, he from prison, when Tony actually calls him through the glass in prison, you know, he says, you know, your mother, you know, she's out of her mind. She doesn't know what she's doing. But Tony knows the truth. He can't accept that.
Well said. Speaking of powerful women who loom large over this show, let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about Melfi. What a season she had. She was integral to season 1. I mean, it was the elevator pitch of The Sopranos is mob guy walks into a psychiatrist's office. Done. Right? That's a sell. That's a sell right there. It sold a movie, a comedy movie with Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal, and it sold this show to HBO to get a pilot made. So, yeah, now we mentioned this that overall, Melfi had a very kind of subtle arc in this season. But it is an arc, and it is an interesting... We really got to see... You know, season 1 was about Melfi helping Tony realize that his mother was a toxic influence on his life and out to kill him. That was her role. That was her function in therapy, was to get this guy to stop having panic attacks and see the truth about his family. Season 2... we mention every episode, and we made a point to mention that these scenes felt meandering and directionless, and not in a way that's like, oh, this is bad writing, these scenes aren't interesting. It was in the sense that Melfi is adrift. We're seeing the effect treating Tony has had on her. What a fascinating turn that this termite, this toxic influence, Tony being poison, has corrupted in a certain sense Dr. Melfi and poisoned her life in a way that is difficult to reckon with. And she starts drinking. She starts engaging in arguments with women over cigarettes in restaurants and embarrassing her terrible son. So let's talk about Melfi's journey in season 2, where she started telling him, get out of my life, to taking him back and getting on the straight and narrow, but still having no strategy at hand to get through Tony's denial systems.
I think that was the first smart thing that they did was in the first episode of season 2. She tells him to fuck off. Yeah. Because that means we get a good, almost half of this season, Tony's not in therapy at all. Yeah. We get glimpses, small runner storylines where Melfi is consulting with her annoying psychiatrist,
Elliot Kupferberg.
Yep. Peter Bogdanovich is so great in this role. But she's wrestling with whether or not to take him back.
I think Elliot's water bottle is one of my honorable mentions.
Or for a food moment.
Yeah, and then as you said, I think it's more of Melfi's therapy as the framework, and then when she does finally invite him back, it's her trying to reconcile with who this guy is in her life. Looming too large, having too much of an effect. Her being too reactive and not being able to even process it without... I mean, she's drinking in the middle of the day. Yeah. During work hours. This is not... It's not professional. It's not like her. Right. At all. So, and it's really, I think, so the story ends up being that she has to come back to herself before she tries to get through Tony's very powerful denial system.
Yeah, I mean, the way season 1 ended, I mean, this guy comes into her life like a wrecking ball. and essentially destroys what she's built and destroys her confidence. And we get to go on this really interesting journey with her as she gets that back. Initially, shunning him, trying to keep him out, going through this self-examination process with Kupferberg, and, gradually putting the pieces back together. I love the meandering therapy sessions because it's meandering for both of them. Tony can't quite figure out what's going on with him, and she can't quite figure out what's going on with her. And then when they finally start to link up by the end of the season, it's divine.
Yeah.
Right? He's still having problems, most notably this season, as Paul has said, problems with denial. But when she comes back, she is keener and she is more focused for having had her failings and her alcoholism and all of that business,
and she tells him flat out, at some point I became scared of you. That's a big thing to admit to him and to herself. It's like, it's a big part of what happened.
But by the time we get to Night in White Satin, and into Funhouse and all that business, I mean, those therapy sessions are actually rewarding, I think. And you can see how much stronger she is, right? When he talks about, again, his affair with Arena and how it's wrapping up, she's been sleeping with me for however many years. Has that been a hardship for her, right? Like the wisecracking to me is a symbol of confidence, right? She's okay standing up to him again. And actually going through the analysis. I know that their last therapy session of the season is not very fulfilling for her, but we can see at least it's back on track.
Yes, there is a potential path forward. And, this is a big question. I think a big dramatic, one of the things you're taught in writing school or drama analysis is the major dramatic question, which, rules are there meant to be bent and broken and twisted and contorted for people who are talented enough to make that work. But essentially, I think from minute one of the show, you're asking, okay, mob guy, having panic attacks, sees a therapist. Can she help him? And we're 2 seasons in now, and that's not clear yet. Can she help Tony? Should she help Tony?
Can he be helped?
Can he be helped? Exactly. What's it? It's been on quite a journey. They dealt with the catastrophe and crisis of season 1. Season 2, Tony, they're not even seeing each other half the time, and then when they do get back, Melfi her life is disintegrating because of the fear and the problems that he has made for her and the trauma of treating him. And can Tony be helped? I guess we don't know by the end of season 2, but we can at least see that she is now back in a position. They've kind of found an interesting way to get back to a good baseline to perhaps get to some root causes next season. We'll see how that plays out. No spoilers, but yeah, I thought it was a great season for Melfi. Lorraine Bracco played it with such grace and dignity as she always does, and I'm looking forward to wherever Tony and Melfi's therapy goes from here. But quite a year for them. Great stuff. It was great to see a different side of Melfi. A lot of season 1 we had to speculate. How does Melfi feel about this based on what we see in The Office?
Right. This went much more behind the curtain with what's going on with her and her life. And her therapy sessions have been so rewarding for us as viewers.
Yep. So I think it's time for another top 3.
Top 3, baby.
Top
Top
three.
3.
Yeah.
3. I'm sorry.
Hey, I was wondering how long that would go. That's great.
A while.
We're going to do favorite characters/performances. I want to extend the caveat here, the what I like to call in the Sopranos podcast, the big exception. We are not going to list Tony as one of our favorite characters' performances. He is so integral to this show, so key to what happens, and the show is around him, and the gravitas of the show is James Gandolfini and the work he put into it. Therefore, there's just no way he wouldn't dominate the list every single year. So Tony, we're taking a moment to acknowledge Tony, James Gandolfini. That's a default number 1 for forever because the show is James Gandolfini. Of course, you strip everything away, it's his show. But we're going to talk about any other characters. This does not have to be characters new to season 2. Your list can, in theory, be identical to what happened in season 1. It's just who, if you think about 3 characters or performances from this season that really got to you, who is it?
Yeah. Who's starting?
I'll start this one.
I feel like I keep starting. I want to start.
Yeah, I'll start this one. So number 3 for me is... and by the way, I have an honorable mention here, but I actually want to save the conversation for in between the top 3 because I think it's worthy of its own conversation. But number 3 for me is Dominic Chianese as Uncle Junior. For the reason, though he was diminished and though he was not in every episode and he was not the primary antagonist, it forced us to see a different side of him. It forced him to do different things. And he was surprising and vulnerable in a way that we hadn't seen before. Slipping in the shower, talking with Catherine Romano and having that sweet conversation in the basement, him dealing with house arrest, him dealing with Bobby. Junior and Bobby provide some of my favorite moments in the show, and just their chemistry is great from minute one, and the way Bobby looks out for him.
Lear and the Fool, man.
Yeah. And Junior, the way I talked at length about the way he's written with the Shakespeare quotes and the funny one-liners and watching TV and some soap opera and commenting on the goings-on this show. It's just Dominic brings such dignity and joy to this character. I had to mention him. He had to make it. He just made it. Number 2 for me is Ida Totoro as Janice.
Sure.
Welcome addition to the show. The fact, look, I'm a pro wrestling fan. I love a heel. The fact that there's a character on the show that you mention it, and everyone who's ever seen the show goes, "Oh, Janice, fuck Janice." You elicit that bit strong of a reaction, even if it's hatred and disgust. You're doing your job as an actor. Because Ida Totoro, by all reports, is an absolute sweetheart.
Yeah.
So killer performance.
Yeah,
she actualizes this woman. You think it's one thing at first, and then you realize who she is. She's manipulative. She's putting on a face. She switches. The acting in Knight in White Satin Armor, when she's on the phone with him, and when she like Jordan broke down the moment after the punch. So special. So Janice is season 2, and speaking of season 2, my number 1 has to be David Proval as Richie April. The Manson lamps, the stare, the cold indifference, cruelty, the griping, the old school, the fact that the guy is like 5'2" and he's still intimidating as fuck. Like he looks like he could slice an eyeball out of your head and not think twice about it. The shit he does and says to Beansy, he's just so callous and evil and menacing. He's an elemental character, not a political character, so he lacks a certain nuance and a certain finesse, but he doesn't, the thing is, like, he's still a threat without that, and that's so interesting, and to this show, it's a very fresh thing for a villain. Junior and Livia had to put on a face. Richie didn't have to put on a face. He is who he is. He's old school. He put on a little bit of a face to Janice until his actual identity was realized in that last moment when he punches her, and it's like, this is who I am. And we know who you are, and so the real Richie kind of comes out at the very end there for Janice, but for the most part, Richie April is exactly who he says he is, and he'll do what he wants to you, and there's nothing you can fucking do about it.
Absolutely.
So Richie April, tour de force performance by David Proval, and even in the little moments where he lends the dignity to it, with the tripe and tomatoes scene and the jacket, and you actually feel a flash of pity for this awful human being.
Mm-hmm.
My list is going to sound a little similar to season 1 because I just have my favorites. And
of course.
Sorry, not sorry. So coming in number 3 is Melfi because watching her kind of fall apart this season, the aftermath of season 1, particularly the smoking incident, particularly her own therapy sessions. She's just so leveled and has such range, Lorraine Bracco, and I love her journey. I really do. Number 2 is Carmela because she's my queen and I love everything she does.
It was very hard to leave her off my list.
Queen Goddess Carmela. I mean, it was hard to leave everybody off.
Right.
Christopher Moltisanti is my number 1 favorite character on The Sopranos, but just again, not this season.
Yeah.
But Carmela is just, I've said quite a bit about her already today, so, or on the retrospective, so I don't need to go into too much, but she's the queen, everything having to do with, what's the carpenter's name?
Vic.
Everything having to do with Vic and the wallpapering and watching her just deal with that, the regat pie, Richie April, everything. She's perfect. And then thirdly, I had Janice too. I mean, as much as my initial reaction in part 1 was ugh, and it will always be ugh, it's exactly what Chris said. She's such a good heel. There are few characters that I react to so strongly on The Sopranos as I do Janice. So she's got to be number 1 for season 2. She's doing her job. She does it well.
I'll be quick with mine because there's a lot of interesting overlay. I have 3 honorable mentions. Vincent Pastore as Big Pussy, great work. Lorraine Bracco as Dr. Melfi, sensational as always. And Dominic Cheney as Uncle Junior.
Yeah.
Particularly what he offers in House Arrest is
Yes.
just sensational.
Yes.
And powerful and funny and weird and all that great stuff. With what, my fucking toes? And that sort of thing. Number 3, Aida Totoro as Janice. It's already been said. Sensational heel. Great work. Number 2, Carmela Soprano.
Yeah.
Edie Falco, there are really good storylines with Carmela as a driving force. For example, I think in Full Leather Jacket, bringing the Regat Pie, being a great gangster. But even in storylines where she is not the main character, where she is reactive, she's unbelievable. Yeah. Just her having to deal with Tony's moods is enough to keep an actor busy. Yep. And Edie Falco just crushes it. I'm in awe of her. Yeah. And number 1, David Proval as Richie April.
We're in sync on that one.
Absolutely. There's not much else to say. I've got fucking fearless for his size. An incredible performance. We hardly knew ye. I guess it wasn't sustainable, like something had to give with what chaos this character brought. But David Proval himself is seems like such a sweet guy and such a generous guy, and he really was onto something with the way that he played this role. Yeah. Both in the way the character could be chaotic and the way that he seemed to simmer and keep things quiet before the calm before the storm that he would execute.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a good point. I was thinking, I remember how I felt the first time I saw Richie April, the very first time I watched The Sopranos. And I knew instantly, I remember making a remark, oh, that guy's bad. You just look at him and that guy's not going to be good news. But yeah, he's just that quiet fear. He doesn't have to be big. He doesn't have, because he's going to ruin your legs and your life and be really grouchy about it,
Absolutely.
So, well said, Paul.
Yeah. My honorable mention is for Robert Patrick as Davy Scatino.
That's who I was talking about. I want to have a conversation about him in between. Yeah.
Sure. Do we want to stop now?
No, let's do it now. Let's talk about Robert Patrick right now because I think his contribution to the season can't be understated.
So this was this season's Vin Makazian.
Right.
So in season 1, of course, we had the legendary John Hurd as private detective, / dirty cop, Vin Makazian. And what we really liked about John Hurd's casting was this was like America's dad, someone who had always been the paragon of fatherly virtue brought low in The Sopranos. We have the opposite in Robert Patrick. He's most famous as the T-1000. He's a screen villain, an unstoppable badass motherfucker. And we cast him against type in this season too. He is a weak-willed gambler, degenerate father, not a good guy, a very humbling role to play, a hard role to play, right? There's nothing macho about Davy Scatino, right? He's whimpering on the floor, sleeping in a tent in his own sporting goods store during the bust out. I mean, it's a pitiful character to play, but the actor does such a good job of playing against type that, again, it's in the playing against type that you get the idea, this guy's life was not supposed to go like this until he met Tony Soprano.
Yep.
Right? And I just think he does a terrific job.
Yeah, I agree. He really did great. So great that this could have been a 1-episode character, but they kept coming back to him. They showed the bust out. I love that they touched back down on him in the finale, and he's just such a sad sack. He can't get the coffee out of the machine, and then he's off to Vegas.
Yeah, and in my mind, he gets the Vin Makazian ending. I mean, Vin literally jumps off a bridge, but this guy's moving to Vegas, and he's a gambling addict. I mean, that's the same thing to me.
Yeah, it might as well be. Yeah, his life is shattered. It's gone. It's ruined. But yeah, I agree. This was the one... This is a guy you bring in to flesh out some elements of season 2, and, he's not quite a main character. He's recurring, but... Yeah, I love what he brought to this, and you very eloquently described what he did and why casting him against type was such a good move. I like these actors they bring in that are this world has had an effect on them. Mm-hmm. And it's Tony can corrupt America's dad and John Hurd, or he can turn the T-1000 to stone.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Well said.
It's like, it's very good, and it's not by accident that they cast these guys for these roles. And
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I specifically wanted to have a little section of this podcast about Robert Patrick and what he brought to season 2.
Absolutely.
But with that, what are your top 3?
Yeah, so my legit top 3. So my number 3 is Michael Imperioli as Chris Moltisanti.
Nice. I'm glad he's on someone's list.
I think it's a monster season for him, honestly. And so we have these twin episodes. We have, you have your Hit is a Hit in season 1, which is like Adriana and Christopher's flirtation with Are We Special, right, in season 1. And season 2, the pair episode is D-Girl, right? Christopher has this thing inside of him. It's a creative spark. It's a yearning. Can he actually get anywhere with it? And this is the second time that we're suggested maybe he's inarticulate and kind of weird about it, but yeah, there is something there. And now we see other people like have an attraction to it, right? There is a fascination. So that is great. But really, the episodes that sell Christopher for me is, of course, Big Girls Don't Cry, where we have him in his acting classes, right? Ultimately, of course, the attempt on his life, and then subsequently his performances in From Where to Eternity. But also, the D-Girl stuff is too good. Yeah. I'll talk about this more when we get to favorite episodes, but I think Christopher in D-Girl is actually like amazing, like really a cut above what we've seen him do so far, and I think it's truly great. And to see him moving up in the family is just such a heartening thing to see. So really, really great. Gosh, he was only my number 3. I'll be brief because we've already kind of like spoken so much about these last two. My number 2 is David Proval as Richie because, come on, he is the elemental force in this. I won't gild the lily too much. We've already talked about what a great actor he is.
Yeah,
He's just
don't
so
gild
good.
me. You can cut it.
Number 1, I think not close, is Aida Turturro as Janice. I think it's her season. She comes in that first episode and you're like, what are we getting? Yeah. What is this? And then you just watch her through the season, and I don't think I have as emotional reaction to anything anyone else does as much as I have a reaction to Janice. Yes, it's usually annoyance. I usually feel the same way Tony does about her, but when she gets hit in the face and she shoots Richie, or even better, that moment at the bus stop when she tells Tony, I loved him so much, she could be full of shit, but I think she wants to believe it. Yeah. And trying to figure out what is there that is real in that complicated moment, I fucking love. And I don't know really many other actors that can do that. Yeah. I think she plays complicated so well. Yeah. And it's just a masterclass performance. For me, Janice is like the season 2 character.
Amen. We're on. Yep. I agree. Janice, she's so good. Well said, guys. Well said. Let's have one more conversation before our final top 3. I want to talk about Carmela. Yeah. She had a hell of a season too, and Edie Falco can do no wrong. Lily had her in her top 3, and she honestly is another one. She almost could get the Tony role, where it's like, any season Carmela could be considered one of the most awe-inspiring performances, and it's correct. You know what I mean? So she has a very emotional season. She's kind of like, and this is elicited by the montage at the beginning of season 2, she's kind of like, more so even than in season 1, tucked into this domestic role. Serving dinner, getting shit out of the oven, staying home, taking care of the kids while Tony goes off to Italy. And she's putting on the face, and she's saying the prayers, and she's doing the best she can to stay afloat. And it just all catches up with her at the end with the Serena situation. And you have to feel for her. But what makes her so compelling is she is not a character like Tony who will wallow in the misery until the point that you're rolling your eyes at him. She always finds a way to take her power. And I love her. I love that about her. What do we think of Carmela this season, the arena thing, and how she begins and ends season 2?
It never sat right with me that she would be okay with the Irina situation. This is presented to us in season 1, and season 1 doesn't have a lot of screen time for Irina, so we don't really know what that relationship is.
Well, she's not okay with the Irina situation.
Well, that's the thing.
She can forget about it if it's not in her face.
Sure.
But when it's in her face, that's when she starts having a problem with it.
But even when I consider just mob wives in general, not just Carmela, not just Edie Falco's Carmela, I always think, like, how do these very strong women who deal with, like, the toughest of rough men, how do they bend themselves into a position where they accept a Gumar, right? Like, how do you get there, right?
I have a theory on this, but I want to hear. Lily wants to say something.
Please. Tradition. you're brought up knowing that that's what happens. That's just
it's part of
the
it's
life.
part of the tradition of the life. It's kind of one of those you
But
get
now
into.
Carmela's not okay with the tradition.
No,
She's not.
she's not. But she loves Tony. That is legit. And it's also like, this is not specific to Carmela, but to the mob wife thing, why these strong, fiery Italian women tolerate this shit is because there's two reasons for that. One, loyalty is everything. And even if someone
aren't being loyal.
right, but even if someone is being disloyal to you, you stand by your man. And it's one of those things like
Fucked up
it's one of those things like
Correct.
you'll yell at him, you'll break stuff in the house, you'll smack him with a fucking pin roller or whatever those fucking things are.
Rolling pin,
Rolling pin. You'll kick him out of the house. You'll have this big drama, but in the end, you take him back because there's like this old Italian like. These boys are gonna drive us crazy. We got and then it's like, I'm sorry. Well, all right, come back. We'll make this work. They do it again. You beat them with the rolling pin. It's like on and on it goes. This thing of ours. There's sort of that's I think a part of it is it's like, and plus don't forget the Catholic thing. That's a big part of it. Is we don't do divorce.
Which
and
the men are also violating by committing adultery.
Yes, it's a hypocritical lifestyle, and it's also
priests aren't supposed to molest little boys. So
and also remember the scene from Goodfellas.
Oh, it's not exactly the same, but yeah, I got
it. Isn't it?
Wow.
Let's not forget the scene in Goodfellas when they sit Henry down and say, you got to go back to your wife. Divorce is not only against the Catholic religion, it's not good for business in this lifestyle because wives know things. Wives know where the guns are hidden. Wives know where the money is. You know what I mean? So divorce is bad news. It's just not a part of the lifestyle. Now, what makes Carmela interesting is she is smarter, like Tony, smarter than your average mob guy. Carmela is smarter, sharper, and more emotionally in touch than a lot of, than say like a Gabriella Dante. Who's just kind of like, yeah, these are how men are. Whatever. I'm going to go to the gym. You want to go to the gym and spend a bunch of money? It's like Carmela is able to buy in to a certain extent, but when it's thrown in her face...
Yeah. Well, what I was saying was initially, like, I never understood how she was okay with it. And in Season 2, we find out the extent to which she is not okay with it.
Yeah.
It kind of comes up almost conveniently. Not lazily in the script. The script is great. But it kind of come up conveniently that the affair also is no longer working for Tony.
Yeah.
So it kind of is convenient for him to get rid of it at the same time that she can no longer take it. But I'm like, this is a decaying factor on a marriage, regardless of whether he ends it or not. The damage is sort of done. And I guess, I have a much more traditional view of trust. I wouldn't cheat on the person that I'm agreed to be in a partnership with. Maybe her definition of trust is more bendy, but I would have to believe, and again, no spoilers, that this is going to be a persistent issue going forward because that contract has already been violated.
I also, if we globalize it a little bit, I feel like it's the same as being an Orthodox Jewish woman or a woman, a Muslim woman who needs to wear a hijab. It's like you may or may not like it, but this is what you've signed on for. This is what you believe. This is what your duty is. And so there's a I'm in this kind of mentality, so I don't know.
In a way, it's almost a dark parallel. It's like Tony may not, on some level, want to kill his best friend, shoot him in the chest, but it's a part of the life. Carmela may not want, on a deeper, true level, to put up with Tony's infidelity and his betrayal, but it's part of the life. It's like you get what you get.
And what I mean by the globalizing comment too is that the gain outweighs the frustration, I suppose. She's living in a really comfortable house. She can buy whatever she wants. If she wants to remodel her house every other month, she can do that. Her kids are going to good schools. Her kids are going to good schools. The good outweighs the bad, just like your faith may outweigh the fact that you don't like the
Sure.
And on The Sopranos,
I wouldn't be able to agree. I wouldn't be able to do that myself, but I also wasn't born into that.
Yeah, on The Sopranos, one's willingness to do the right thing is going to always be directly connected to that person's willingness to disrupt their level of comfort, and that's always going to be a compromise. I think another thing that makes Carmela pretty interesting this season is that things are, again, I would use the term more unpredictable. In the last season, there was a kind of stasis, I think, around, like, Carmela knows generally that Tony is in this lifestyle and he's likely not faithful, but I could rationalize it XYZ way. Plus, the advice and the sexual attention that she's getting is from Father Phil. So it's like, well, that's not... Plus, the kids are also in a kind of a place of stasis. Like, okay, things are humming along. AJ's got these issues. Meadow's a star student. This season has Vic Musto, which really heightens the sexual tension.
The anti-Tony, basically.
Right. It's also got Meadow going off to school, which is another question for Carmela to start asking, where do I fit?
Yeah.
Which also brings up the question of, like, even floating having another kid. So I think it has her kind of at 6s and 7s in an interesting way, which is why, as Lily said, Edie Falco just gets to be the queen over and over again because she owns these scenes. She does such a terrific job with them. I think, particularly for me in Knight in White Satin Armor.
Yeah, and also from Where to Eternity, that scene she has with Tony, isn't it a sin to undo the good work he's done? She says, you ought to know you made a living of it. Just these gut ball punch lines she gives him when she needs to.
So we do have to wrestle a bit with Carmela's hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's...
Sometimes we're all hypocrites. Wheel in the sky keeps on turning. It comes up in house arrest. It's... or bust out, rather. It's all of these characters demonstrate hypocrisy.
Right.
It's just a reality of the world and of the show.
I would posit, much like Pussy's relationship with the FBI, Carmela's relationship with Tony, after a time, is not going to be a sustainable entity unless major changes are made.
Interesting thesis. I tend to agree, based on what we're seeing here, that this needs...
I only say that because the theme of her unhappiness in this marriage comes up almost every episode.
Especially this season.
Yeah.
And
I agree. It's a challenge for me in watching the show, I think, because I admire Carmela in a way. I find her very likable, but having to wrestle with her hypocrisy, like the hypocrisy of the other characters, is a tough one. It is for me.
That's what makes her so interesting. I'm excited to see what season 3 bears out for Carmela. I have a feeling we're going to have another great Carmela conversation in our season 3 retrospective. No surprise. But let's take this opportunity, guys. I want to get into our final top 3.
Final top 3!
Final top 3!
Final top 3!
And then, so we're going to give our final top 3 here, and then I want to give a last closeout, last things thoughts on season 2, and we will call this a wrap. And I'm excited, but let's get into our top 3 favorite episodes.
It's like choosing children.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
It is what you call a classic difficult decision.
Yeah, and it's hard too because like some of your favorite moments are not necessarily in your favorite episodes.
Yeah,
you're trying to take them in total. So
right.
I'll start,
please,
if that's all right. So my number 3. There are 2 episodes this season that they loom large in Sopranos canon, and those 2 episodes, of course, are Knight in White Satin Armor and Funhouse, where it's like they're usually on people's top 10 lists, if not top 5 short lists.
And sometimes even for the whole series.
Right, exactly. And it's hard for me to have not picked them. So I just did the logical thing for once, and I didn't try to dislike them. I just picked them. Right, so my number 3 is the Knight in White... Sorry, my number 3 is Funhouse. My number 2 is the Knight in White Satin Armor. My number 1, believe it or not, it's still D-Girl. I keep coming back to this episode. I really adore it. And if I have an hour that's free and I'm in a Sopranos mood, I might just throw on D-Girl. I think it's a lovely companion to hit as a hit, or even it has a kind of a self-contained structure similar to College, where you could just watch it just for Christopher's journey, just to see him, finally make the choice at the end of which life he really wants to live and who he's going to serve, right? D-Girl was just so important to me because it was a Christopher episode, and I love where his journey is in terms of his creativity, in terms of his life with the mob. I thought Jon Favreau was such a sport and loved him in this episode. I love the meta conversation being had about gangsterism in art and how the artistic Hollywood people seek out sparks of authenticity to give their artifice life. And Christopher might not have creativity, he might not be a wordsmith, but he has the reality of his life, that he is a real person, that he lives an interesting life, something that these fake people, these fake flaky people who live this ephemeral artistic Hollywood life, they don't have. They don't have his realness. It's the same thing that makes his Rebel Without a Cause turn special in Big Girls Don't Cry, right? Christopher is special. That's actually kind of what we get from these episodes, and this line is just like, at first we're like, oh, these kids, they think they're special, but they're not. And then it's kind of like, oh, Chris, he thinks he's special, and oh, he might be a little special, actually. And that's really interesting. The affair with Amy Seraph is interesting. Also, she is beautiful, and, it is titillating to watch them getting it on. Let's just be, honest here for a second. Some sexy stuff going on in this episode. And it was something I remembered after all these years of being like, wow, I love D-Girl. That's a great episode. And there's almost no more iconic image for me from the season other than the really obvious moments of him at the bottom of those stairs in that agency as she ascends up to that top heavenly door and away from him and out of his life to some unreachable place and leaves him down there.
And what a fun bit of irony that the people who make their living preying on people feel very similarly about Hollywood. It's like that they're leeching off of them.
Right.
It's so good.
It's a great episode. So it is D-Girl for me, but I am acknowledging Funhouse and Knight in White Satin Armor are better episodes of television. My personal favorite.
Yeah,
this is the list. It's personal favorite. D-Girl's my favorite.
I'd like to go next because I have a very similar list explanation. So
please do.
For my number 3 is Commendatori. I just love that episode.
Yes, yeah.
Again, Polly in Italy is... I would watch an entire season of Polly in Italy. 2 is Knight White Satin Armor. Couldn't say anything better myself. And D-Girl for exactly why Jordan said it.
Love it.
Not the best episode, but my favorite episode.
Yeah.
If I have a spare hour and I am in a Sopranos mood, I will also watch D-Girl.
Yes, I love it. I'm so happy you got this love. This is great.
Oh, well, yeah. D-Girl is one of my all-time favorites.
It's a special episode.
I just love it. And with that, we can move on.
Okay.
I'll go. My top 3 favorite episodes. A lot of crossover here. I want to give an honorable mention here. In much the same way that you guys talk about D-Girl being a great... And I agree with every single thing you said about it. I had a smile on my face the whole time you were talking about it because everything you were saying is true, and I love the Hollywood stuff. But an episode I will throw on of The Sopranos anytime and know I'll have a great time and really kind of dive in because the episode has such a special energy to it. I want to give an honorable mention to The Happy Wanderer.
Yeah,
it's centered around the executive game.
Real good.
It builds up to that game, and then it's like perfect like crescendo to this event. The event happens, and then there's all the fallout, and it's got some great stuff. Really electric energy. Great
and
scenes.
the executive game is exciting.
Yes.
It is exciting, and I'm just going to vouch for what Chris said. He does watch this one on its own quite a bit. I've seen it so many times, and it makes me feel terrible every time. As great as an episode and as great as the executive game is, I just feel horrible. Makes me very sad.
Yeah.
It's a very sad episode.
Yep. The number 3 for me is a different episode. I'm not sure anyone else is going to pick this one, and it's not one that jumps out. You look at the season 2 list, and there were a couple things I left off thinking like, ooh, should I swap this out? But I ended up sticking with my guns, and I'm glad I did. Big Girls Don't Cry.
Yeah.
Chris in the acting class. And for an episode that provides so many laughs and such action-packed badassery from Furio, we get Tony and Melfi on the phone while that's happening in the parlor, and you can hear the screams and whatever from inside. And it's just such an odd juxtaposition. And then when Tony ends up back in therapy for that first scene with Melfi, and he drops such ugliness on her about it, he just says exactly what he was doing. He says to her, I wished it was me in there. And she replies, given the beating or taking it. And then we cut to Christopher sitting down at his computer, and you think he's going to give something special about maybe his experience or something he's gone through. And he just throws it all out and takes it out to the garbage. And you got that melancholy jazz playing. It's hard to describe in words what that ending and that whole episode makes me feel. But it's such an odd blend. And it's something that only The Sopranos can accomplish in an episode that has so much laughter and movement to it. But yet the ending feels so bleak and sad. And it's really good shit. It's just that's the sublime shit that they're able to pull off, and so that's a sleeper, but it's a good one for me. And then 2 and 1, Funhouse number 2, Knight in White Satin Armor.
Hard not to pick them.
It is hard not to pick them. They are just so good. Funhouse is just so. We talked about the dreams, and it's just so creative. That is so beautifully written. I don't know how they wrote that one. That's what's so baffling. It's like, how do you sit down and put those dream sequences on a fucking page?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. I'm in awe of it. Therefore, it has to be on my list. And Knight in White Satin Armor, if we do a series retrospective after all 6-7 seasons, Knight in White Satin Armor might be on that top 3. So we said all we have to say about that one on our episode about it, but it's just, it speaks for itself. It's a Sopranos classic.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, close us out, babe.
All right. Got to give a quick shout out. 2 honorable mentions. One is Knight in White Satin Armor, just for its sheer excellence.
Yep.
And From Where to Eternity.
Yes.
Michael Imperioli's offering with the writing, stupendous.
Yep.
So many funny moments, of course, and really, really powerful moments. Some gut-wrenching stuff. And some stuff that was very emotional for me. Number 3 is Funhouse. Because of the way it ended the season, because of the balls on it, because of how powerful and playful it is, because of Patterson's direction, because of the writing. Number 2, a little different, House Arrest. About boredom, about loneliness, about ennui. Just so well done, so well executed. One of my memories of this season is Jordan talking about that ending and how emotional I felt. And number 1 for me is The Happy Wanderer. It's the number 1 choice for me, not in terms of the overall quality, though I think it's great, but because of how it's different, because of how it focuses on this one thing is fun. It's dynamic to focus on the game and the doubleness of Tony's nature and how he has to reflect on what he does and how he, of course, makes Meadow do the same. And bringing in the kids was a really smart way in the writing to begin to show some of the consequences of what these guys do, which we also talked about. It's not just, that so-and-so got it, but they had it coming to them. Eric Scatino's just a kid. He's not responsible for his father's gambling addiction.
Yeah.
But we see the overall in the loss. And another moment to me is the moment at the end, Tony sitting there thinking as the lights go down in that auditorium and everyone else is ready to watch the show and Tony's reflecting on what he does and what the cost is.
Yeah. Well said, guys. That's season 2. Are there any final thoughts? Anything you want to say about season 2 of this great show? Another great one in the can. Another near perfect outing for these folks. It's yet again another situation. It's going to be hard to top. I'm excited to discuss season 3 with you guys. But
yeah, I just want to say that I'm gonna miss Big Pussy so much.
Yes.
Like what a cool character that was, and I know he did some shitty, horrible things, but that's a familiar face that you miss on the show. I feel so that's a tough loss.
It's definitely the biggest death up to this point. So there's it's not a death that the show can't recover from, but you look forward thinking it's gonna. That's one of those. It's gonna be a different show without this character on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm so excited for season 3 on a personal level because listeners, I've revealed this several times, but my Sopranos viewing when I was younger was not very consistent. So season 3 begins the dark time for me, where season 3 is a season I watched sporadically, so I only remember some of it. So now I'm actually going to be watching some new television, which is really, really exciting for me.
Yeah, I think 3 and 4 are that way for you, right? It's
3 and 4 are kind of the blackout seasons.
You kind of came back in for the end more.
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
So I came back in around, no spoilers. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Very cool. Yeah, that's exciting. Anything else about season 2, guys? I can't say enough good about it. I could just talk for the next 2 hours about how much I love it and what it means to me and how artful it is. And we actually had several topics we didn't get to, but you know what? I can't keep you here all night, folks. Plus, we got lamb to eat. So we're going to get going here. Did you have anything, Paul?
No, I would only say that I think I will give season 2 this credit over season 1, as I think this is the beginning of when The Sopranos took off into the stratosphere and really left everything else behind. And was actually forced, I think, because it kept going, to get more creative if they were really going to surprise us. Mm-hmm. So, and that we've talked a few times today about when Janice shoots Richie. There are more moments that will really shock you like that. Mm-hmm. And only The Sopranos, I think, can produce them.
Yeah, when we're heading to some crazy places, season 3 is great. I'm smiling thinking about it, but yeah, this is a great show. This you're right, Paul. This solidified it for me and for pop culture and for television history as, this wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a one-off. The Sopranos are here and they will stay as long as HBO as long as David Chase keeps saying yes to HBO, because HBO probably would have had this run for 10 seasons if they could. But yeah, it's been great, and I have the image of Tony smoking that cigar and then the fade out to the ocean burned into my head as what a place to leave it. You know, where do you pick up from there? We're all, as Jordan said in the last episode, we're all still in the fun house. And Carmela says the fun never stops as she hands Tony the phone, and indeed it doesn't. We'll keep on turning for season 3. And speaking of season 3, folks, just a little housekeeping on the podcast here. We are going to be taking a very short, relatively short compared to how long people who are watching The Sopranos had to wait between seasons, break in between season 2 and season 3. So when you're listening to this, we're going to take a couple weeks off at the end of the summer just to kind of gain our bearings. We have a couple new things we're working on for the show for season 3 that may need a little time to incorporate. Life is getting back to normal post-COVID, so we're just going to take our time, bank up a couple shows, bring you some quality audio content, some great audio Sunday dinner, and we will be back for season 3. We will be doing all 86 episodes, and we're in it. We're in it to win it. We are in The Sopranos, and with that said, I'm looking forward to getting back with all of you. Thank you for supporting our podcast and listening to this. Thank you for following us on social media and being a part of our family and being a part of The Sopranos community. I'm Chris D'Amato.
I'm Lily D'Amato.
I'm Paul Mancini.
And I'm Jordan Hugh.
And we will see you in Mr. Ruggiero's Neighborhood, Season 3.
Got myself a gun.